Okay, thank you very much, Steffi. Hello, everyone. This is Evren, and our speakers today, our panelist speakers today are all amazing scholars from different parts of the world, and we will be listening to their experiences. And the reason or the idea to organize this event appeared when the Middle Eastern Studies Association Global Academy Fellowship was awarded to me this year. I was a fellow last year as well, and this year I had an email exchange with the Global Academy organizers, and we said, why don't we organize an event at Guelph and give a chance to the scholars who are displaced to express themselves with their real life experiences instead of their research, because the research is shared everywhere by articles, by panels, by conferences, but there are other obstacles or issues displaced scholars are actually living or experiencing. So, and then I approached Dr. Hamid and GIDS, and thanks to their wonderful support and of course the support of University of Guelph, we are here today. And I'm so pleased to welcome Dr. Zeno, Dr. Yar, Dr. Yenigün, Dr. Alawadhi, and Dr. Mohammadpour. And I just want to start without wasting a lot of time by trying to give you the background of the events that have been happening in the Middle East and North Africa, and especially the Afghanistan crisis, which forced more people to be displaced. And among these people, scholars are also included. Scholars, when they are displaced, faced with different circumstances regarding their occupation, regarding their experiences back in their home countries, because in a new country, the academic traditions or the academic experiences people have must be renewed, or let's say in a better word, these people must always start over from the scratch. So as I said, I was one of them. And as Dr. Hamid said, I have been in Guelph since 2018, but I know that all my fellow displaced scholars face similar issues and problems. So that's why this organization, this meeting today is important, to give you this background and to show you a little bit more about the details, give you some inside information about these scholars, about these displaced scholars, and what they are facing what they faced back in their home country and what they are facing in the host country under the name of push and pull factors. So if you have any questions to our speakers in the meantime, please do write them on the chat, or you can also send them to me through the chat option, and I will compile them and try to ask these questions to our panelists in the final part of the event. So if you don't mind, I would like to begin with a warm-up question. It depends on our panelists to answer. We really don't want to put any orders or any kind of pressure on the panelists. So I want to ask the question, and then our panelists can answer by one if they wish. The first question I would like to ask is, by way of introducing yourselves, can you tell us briefly about where you are from originally, and what were the main factors that caused you to leave? In other words, what were your push factors for migration? So, let's begin with Dr. Zeno. I see him as the first face here. Let's begin with him.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Okay, so I will be brief, and so everyone had a starting point. What basically compelled us to leave our first country. That's when the Arab Spring took place in Syria, like Egypt and every single other country. So I was around that time doing my PhD in archaeology. So currently I'm like a Carl Lewis-Steen visiting lecturer and professor at Amherst College in political science. So just to give you a hint about the shift in even in my career. So up until 2012, I was conducting my field work for my dissertation. I was a PhD candidate, so I'm done with the prospectus and every single aspect of that. And I had an experience of in archaeological excavations for over 10 years. And then the Arab Spring happened, and I was politically active. So in that movement, had regular meeting with activists around like slogans around the like the really the heady days of the revolution around that time, 2011 and 12. Then there was a critical juncture, one of the many critical junctures in Syria in July 2012. There was a mysterious assassination of senior officers in the army. And then that was a turning point in the uprising from actually mostly largely peaceful protest to more bloody civil war. So that was a turning point where I had to leave and join my wife, who was stuck in Istanbul doing kind of summer school. Around that time, we both had a visa like to come to the United States because she had a scholarship to do master's degree in communication at Ohio University, and I was a dependent. So I was just coming with her to make sure everything is all right and going back to Syria to finish my dissertation. So that then I left, and things became worse and worse. Anyone who was following the Syrian conflict knows like things got more hellish than it started. So after a year in Ohio, I started to think. I worked at a restaurant, Chipotle, for almost 6-7 months. Then we ran out of everything, like money, resources, and so I didn't have any support or any institution that actually I tried to accommodate me and actually to continue my research as an archaeologist in the United States. I didn't find it. Still like mostly white structure. It's most of the excavations are done around the Mediterranean, but you cannot actually be like a participant. You are just a source of data. So I saw that even in political science later. So then I met with an amazing professor at Ohio University, and I was collecting my ethnographic observation in the context of the uprising, and he said, like, you have a trove of data. You have to apply for political science, and then you can make use of them. You need theories, you need training, like to make use of this. And that was what I did. I applied for a master's program there, and I got a scholarship. And then my whole career shifted now to political science. Then both my wife and I applied for UMass, University of Massachusetts Amherst, and we both actually got admitted there and finished our PhD last year. So that was I will comment on other more complications that we faced later, but this is just a background.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zeno. Before we go and continue with Dr. Yar, I just want to let you know that this event looks like a very male, not looks like, it is an all-male event, as you can see, all of us here, but this is not an intended decision or choice. We have reached to several fellows and several displaced scholars, and this is the participants who wanted to join this event. So just wanted to raise that as another point in order to relieve all of you. So thank you. And Dr. Yar.
Is it possible if I go last, Dr. Altinkas?
You want me to ask the question again? Of course.
No, I want to go last. Let other people too.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. The question is, by way of introducing yourself, can you tell us briefly where you are from originally, and what were the main factors that caused you to leave? In other words, what were your push factors for migration? Thank you.
I think Dr. Taraky would like to go after everybody else. So why don't we continue with Dr. Alawadhi
Hamid.
next?
Yeah.
It's me, correct? Yes, thank you. So my name is Hamid Alawadhi. I'm originally from Yemen. I got my PhD in mid-1990s, so it's in the last century. I spent more than 25 years teaching Arabic and French, because I have my PhD from the Sorbonne University in Paris, in France. And I published so far more than 12 books in 3 languages, in fact, Arabic, English, and French. I also published more than 60 papers, studies, reports, and I was head of commissions, committees, especially when I was working in UNESCO as ambassador for 5 years. And I worked within the International Institute of Education in Geneva as a vice head president at that time for 2 years session. So I'm in the domain of education for several years. And I did research, and among my publication is the most important cultural project of Yemen, which is the Encyclopedia of Yemen. So we achieved the 2nd edition in 4 volumes when I was a chief editor. And then we were preparing this 3rd edition in 10 volumes. Unfortunately, because of the war, everything was stopped. So as you can see, I live Yemen because 2 main reasons. Of course, Yemen, as you know, all is witnessing horrible, heinous war since 2015, and so almost 7 years where everything is destroyed. In first place, the relation and connection between people. And of course, the infrastructure, schools, museum, hospitals, everything is destroyed by bombardment and by internal conflict. So this is the case in Yemen. This is one of the reasons that pushed me to leave the country, of course, to save my family and myself from that situation. In fact, I lived Yemen in 2015. I was fortunate to get to United States of America at that time. And I'm since then under what they call it TBS. Perhaps I'll have the time later on to explain a little bit about it. So the second reason behind my departure from Yemen, which is very important, is about education, because I saw that the educational system in Yemen was interrupted. And my son, I have a son, at that time it was 10 years. So I leave the country because I'm looking for an education for my son. And again, I'm fortunate to get with him and my wife to United States. Of course, my family is fragmented. This is another subject that maybe I'll raise it later on.
Dr. Alawadhi, thank you very much for your introduction. And I would like to continue with Dr. Mohammadpour, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for organizing this wonderful panel. My name is Ahmad Mohammadpour. I am originally from Iran. I am Kurdish. I was born into a Kurdish and Sunni family. And as you know, in Iran, the Kurds are basically considered ethnic and religious community, basically a minority that are different in terms of religion and culture and language with the dominant ethnic group. So the Kurdish people are subject to collective punishment, but at the same time, we have those individual experience, people like me who have been displaced because of the basically ethnic and religious identity. So I got my PhD in 2007 from Shiraz University. I was graduated in sociology. And right after that, I became assistant professor of sociology at the University of Bu Ali Sina in Hamadan. So I spent around 4 years, and in those years, I was experiencing moments and episodes of interrogation basically every day, every week. So I was always back and forth between those like security institutions, answering to their questions, making sure that I am loyal to the system and I am committed to what they want. So all those signatories, basically, papers that they were forced me to sign. But anyways, for 4 years, I have been, being monitored by the system. So before I get dismissed from Iranian academia into 2011 under the Ahmadinejad presidency, I had published 9 books and 67 articles in Persian and in Kurdish and also in English. In 2011, after 4 years of back and forth between me and the security authorities in the university, finally I was approached by the IRGC, the Islamic Republic, Guard Corp, and they wanted me to collaborate with IRGC and to share my research with them and to work on Kurdish people. Basically, they wanted me to spy on people and specifically on Kurdish scholars in Iranian Kurdistan or East Iranian Kurdistan, which I absolutely refused. And as a result, I was told that I have to pay the price. So in 2011, before I get persecuted by the system formally, I decided to leave Iran. So I left Iran to Iraqi Kurdistan, where I taught at Erbil University, Department of Philosophy for 2 years. And as you know, the Iraq is so dangerous, specifically, even now it's considered a backyard of, security backyard for Iran and many other of those regional, those states in the region. So in 2014, I was fortunate to be able to come to United States with the support of Scholar Rescue Fund Institute, SRF. So I was accepted at Vanderbilt University as a visiting scholar of anthropology. In 2016, and of course I came with my kids and my family. I had like a 2-3 years old son, and my daughter was just 1 year old at that time. So in 2016, when my fellowship was expired, I knew that I can't go back Iran. I applied for asylum, and I know that there is no way back to Iran. So I decided to get my second PhD because I wanted to avoid at least another form of discrimination in the Western academia. So in 2016, I applied for PhD program, and I was accepted in 2017 to the University of Massachusetts, where Basileus also studied there. And I am currently completing my PhD program. I am going to defend my dissertation in less than a month. And that's a very short story of me over the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammadpour. And let's continue with Dr. Yenigün.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation for organizing this, Steffi and Evren. And yes, I'm Halil, and just like Evren, I'm from Turkey. One major, embarrassment in a certain way, but in another way, like a curiosity for many people, is what a person from Turkey would do among like a crowd where people are from one of the major, some of the major war-torn countries that are going through civil wars. Actually, this has even become like a kind of a line in an attack piece against, Turkey's Academics for Peace recently, Turkey depicted as a relatively peaceful and democratic or like stable country. But that is actually the point. And also like, unlike Ahmad, I'm from the, not from the minority, I'm from the, as a background, from the Turkey's all like majority groups in all senses of the term, in terms of like the religious groups, sectarian groups, ethnic groups, and urban developer, etc. Like the then what I am doing here. So I got my PhD in 2013 after my college in Istanbul. I moved to the US for my PhD, and I got my PhD from Charlottesville, Virginia, University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia, and kind of a myopia for many political scientists at the time that I shared. I thought Turkey was getting better, and we thought Turkey was getting more democratic in certain ways, even though like with some signals that are indicating that it is going to just get worse after it got better. So I worked as a political scientist, as an assistant professor at Istanbul Commerce University for 3 years in a tenure track position. As a junior scholar, it wasn't basically, we found ourselves after GIDS protests in 2013 in activism, like some people despise around here as collectivism is what we were doing. I was also part of human rights organization and doing some other work for basically volunteering for some activist causes, given that we were alarmed by Turkey's situation and the establishment and perpetuation of or consolidation of a dictatorship, basically, from 2013 to 2016, which culminated in the mysterious, enigmatic coup attempt in 2016, like as some people like the Reichstag fire, which gave the perfect, pretext to President Erdogan to start the Great Purge, as some people call it, and 7,000 academics in Turkey were dismissed. I was actually out of Turkey before that because the regime very much likes to portray the whole thing as a necessary response to such a huge existential crisis as a coup attempt. But I myself am a living proof of like the mendacity of that kind of argumentation, because I myself was kicked out of my university, dismissed from my position in February 2016, many months before the coup attempt. And this was in response to what we did as a group of scholars, 1128 in the first wave of signatories, and then 2212, I think, in the second wave, during the final deterioration of the regime, the democratic situation, when Erdogan decided to drop the peace process with the Kurds and start a civil war, a renewed civil war that was marked with like urban war zones and destruction and mayhem, and also most notoriously Cizre basement massacre, where more than 200 people who were sheltered in basements, they were burned alive by certain gases, and which also went its way to UN human rights reports. So in the midst of those crises, before even that big basement massacre happened, we signed up a peace petition to take a stand, to take our basically last stand before the regime would break down, the democratic regime would break down for good. And this last stand was, we won't be a party to this crime. So immediately afterwards, the whole group of academics were targeted by the regime in so many different ways. I can single out my case. Mine was a minor one, although like the chair of the board of trustees at my university targeted me on a major newspaper, giving my full name, as he's gonna do whatever is necessary to this mandate the supporter of imprisonment mandate, who has no like place among the Turkish nation, etc. And a few weeks after that, a major newspaper attacked Doc, a mouthpiece of the government, basically ordered the university to kick me out immediately by dedicating 2 columns to me personally and calling me a PKK academic just for signing a petition. And that was the end of my academic life in Turkey. And since then, I've been in different places, from Germany to Stanford University, then living as a lecturer, and from being under like a very heated political climate where we were targeted as the major targets of any regime that would kill democracy, right? Media and academia. So the early warning signals. So we had the greatest purge, basically among many countries, and this is also like evidenced by the fact that even like 2020, 2021, academics from Turkey are among the top 3 in Scholar Rescue Fund application database. This is an official number that I've just seen during an event the other week. So Afghanistan only like made us like the 3rd place. Yemen is the 2nd place now, and we are among those nations, not because of the war, but because of a direct attack on the academics by a regime dedicated to eradicate free speech from the country. And right now I'm struggling, I'm fighting the other fight over here. It is shared by other factors. That is the current corporate structure of the university, which makes us increasingly obsolete as scholars, and also like people with our background, people who have political positions, political stance that are celebrated when they invite us for events and to like acclaim our courage, etc. But when it comes to finding a job, all of these things become a hurdle and a baggage, and also like some kind of bad signal for the hiring committees. And this is a true fact, and we should talk also more about that, not just speaking out events of these events, but also those kind of things. Sorry for the long introduction, but I think this just sums up my points for the speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Yenigün. Just to add a very tiny thing to your experience, because as you said, I'm also from the same country. After GIDS protests in 2013, there has been another purge in Turkey, which was not so much widespread on the media, which was not a direct attack by the government. It was a purge to a group of academics who have actively participated in GIDS protests, and then all the universities they worked at have used some very indirect mobbing methods to force those people to resign from their positions. I was one of them, for instance. Last time I checked, there was a total number of 800 scholars like this, but we were not an organized group back in those days. And now that I listen to you, the lack of communication between academics like all of us has also caused the government to take a harder punch on all of us, actually. So that was a very good explanation, and thank you very much.
But thanks to that peace petition, we got a group now, like as an academics for peace group.
I know.
And yeah. We may thank the government for that silver lining.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. Thanks. And last but not least, Dr. Taraky.
Thank you, Dr. Evren. As much as I don't want to talk about myself, I just want to talk about others, about people who are oppressed and living in bad condition. But because of the program agenda, I have to speak about myself. I belong to the generation who survived the first collapse of Afghanistan in 1992. There's one thing called purge, or kicking you out from a room, or from a building, or from a corridor. The other issue is that the building is collapsing. it's a very major thing. So in 1992, the Afghanistan statehood collapsed, and I had a master's in architecture and planning, and another master's in arts and art history. And I struggled to take my family out of the misery in Kabul, where the jihadi warlords were fighting it among themselves, and they're looting people, looting people's belongings and raping women. So I left and I ended up in Canada in '98. Worked for a consulting firm, an architecture firm, and an engineering firm for almost a decade, producing lots of work. And then in 2008, I returned to Afghanistan to just be part of the so-called development, which in reality did not happen. And I was under the impression that the development is happening. And when I went, I served as a managing director of the Kabul New City. It's a master plan stage. So I worked for a couple of years, and then I noticed that there is lots of problems between the projects that is initiated by major international donors like World Bank, like Asian Development Bank, other OPEC and other agencies, and then the realities on the ground in those poor countries. There was a totally disconnect, and this made me to go back to academia and pursue my doctoral studies, and I finished my doctoral studies at the University of Guelph in the area of water resources development and international development. So these knowledge informed me about how the development discourse is working and where it is stagnating. I belong to the first generation of the collapse, which happened in '92. And thanks to COVID, I stayed home, and I was not in Afghanistan because I was there teaching at the Kabul University on a volunteer basis. So I was here that the second collapse happened. The Taliban took over, and the Americans ran away. And actually, the collapse was starting way before that. Currently, I would like to inform all the participants of today's event that it is not about one person. It is a mass. It's a system. It's a mass interrogation of scholars, people of knowledge. The Minister of Higher Education of Afghanistan just a couple of weeks ago announced that they are not in need of modern traditional knowledge and scholarship. They don't like science, physics, and astrology. They don't need that. They said that we want religious studies, religious scholars. Now they are trying to assign or give the scientist names, professorships to people who went to the religious schools, and all these scholars who are studied physics and mathematics and engineering and water resources, literature, all of them, they are not needed. Apparently, over 12,000 of these scholars are now staying at home. Their salaries are not paid, and a few thousand left. And I'm so glad that I just found one of these scholars, the young scholars who approached me back in 2000, and I don't know, Mr. Majidi can correct me, maybe 2016, he approached me about developing a master's degree curriculum for the Herat University where he belonged. I was helping him, and apparently he connected with me again, and he is the one who just left Afghanistan. I know how much hurdles, how much problems he must have gone through to get out of the Afghanistan in this situation that everybody is aware of. So I'm very happy that he's here. I do not want to talk more about myself, and I rather give a chance to the audience to hear from Majidi, who just left Afghanistan, which is under the occupation of the Taliban forces. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Yar. I just had a small chat with Mr. Majidi. He said that he's in a distant timeline. It's like midnight there, so he wants to keep his talk short. But here he is, Mr. Majidi. Can we also listen to your experience?
Thank you very much, Evren, and thank you very much, colleagues, everyone, for giving me the chance to speak shortly about my experiences. It is great to in such platform and hear from the seniors who are sharing their life experiences, and to feel that I'm not alone in this, and others have experienced and made good impacts out of it, and finally they are at even better positions. This is Nasser. I am a civil engineer. I have studied at Taraky University, and later on I have studied my master's degree in water engineering in Delft in the Netherlands. Upon graduation, I returned back to my country with proud to work in my country, and as Mr. Taraky mentioned, to even develop a curriculum for further studies at Taraky Engineering faculty, and for which we did with the support of Mr. Taraky, and it was supposed to start admitting, accepting students from the coming semester, which unfortunately everything now is on the air. In parallel to my academic work, which I was doing with Taraky University, I was a volunteer lecturer and research associate at the Taraky University. And also I am an employee of the World Bank group in Afghanistan, for which we are working on development projects in water supply and sanitation across the country. And also I had some social activities in Afghanistan, for which I was in contact with foreigners and foreigner people and tourists whom they were visiting Afghanistan. And I was trying to, as interest for me, showing them around the country. And for that, I was coming to the media and news several times. And then all of these, like my experiences with the international organizations, my extracurricular activities, being in the media and also being in the faculty, all these made me feel very, very much unsafe upon collapse of the government. And then I was urged by my family to leave the country, even though it was alone, because I was not able to take any of my family members with me. So I temporarily relocated to Dushanbe city of Tajikistan, which was the only option I had at the time. And I'm currently still here. And just now, despite the fact of being so much worried about the future of my country, the works we have done, the projects we did, and are not unknown, the future of them, most of them are canceled. The department that we had, the new department in the faculty that we had developed, which is still is not clear what will happen to it. And the most important, of course, my family, whom are feeling very much unsafe, and I feel sometimes not good that they might be under indirect threat because of me. So with all these concerns, I am now in a country that with actually no, I can not see anything clear in the horizon of my in here, because I am on a visa and I'm worried about my stay here, my future career, my family, and everything. So it's just in my mind, everything is at the moment, to be honest, is so messy. I'm not sure what will happen, but just I'm trying to think properly, to see the options, the opportunities to save my career, to continue my passion, which is research, engineering, studying, and to that at the end of the day, after a few years, I'm hopeful that the situation gets better, so that I could also, like the other seniors that they mentioned about their experiences, I also can have a good impact at the end of the day. So sorry if I talked longer. I didn't intend to, but just it's like from my heart. I felt that someone is hearing, so I just it came. So thank you very much, and over from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majidi. It was very interesting to hear, and also I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thank you very much. So in the first round of questions to our panelists, we had a chance to listen to the push factors and what happened to them in different contexts, and what is actually happening right now in the case of Afghanistan, thanks to Dr. Yar and also Mr. Majidi, we had a first-hand experience by listening to what's actually going on in a conflict-torn country. So the second part that I intend to focus on with my questions is mostly about the experiences of our displaced scholars here in the North America, because after all, we are all either in Canada or in United States. And after we arrived here, we briefly had a chance to listen to Dr. Mohammadpour's experience, Dr. Yenigün's reaction to the actual events that's actually happening in the job market. So I want to direct more targeted questions to each one of the panelists in that case. And for instance, I want to start with Dr. Mohammadpour and ask him about the process of applying for asylum, and how was it for you and your family? What did you feel? I mean, you had a PhD, you were an assistant professor back in your home country, but then you had to start over from the scratch, and now you said you have a PhD to complete, etc. And also you applied for an asylum. How was it like for you and your family? Because obviously you were not the only one who suffered throughout this process. So can you share this with us?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, of course. Well, it was absolutely, horrible. It was a very stressful procedure process. When I moved here in 2014, as you mentioned, I had a PhD in my pocket, but there is such a unwritten rule in the Western academia, unfortunately, that as long as you don't have a degree from here, I mean, it's not written anywhere, but it's applicable. And you feel yourself powerless. You always feel that I am the same person after years of getting a second PhD. I am the same person. I know I have the same language skill. I have the same, I mean, the only thing that has changed is that I have published more articles that I could publish without this second PhD, But at the same time, we had to convince everyone that, hey, we know what's going on in academia, and we have been a teacher once upon a time and all those things. But when I moved here, I applied for asylum. And in 2014, it took us 5 years to be able to get a 45 minutes asylum interview. And in all those years, my kids, my family, they didn't have any social security number. That means that we were always struggling with paperwork for medical, insurance, for everything, because my kids did not officially exist in this country. Very specifically, I was listed as a single when it came to to tax issues. My kids were not included. My dependent, they didn't exist officially, but they were with me here. I had to pay for them, but at the same time, they did not exist. So after 5 years, I faced many physical and mental issues to the extent that I got sick for months. And I remember that one of my, basically my attorney, he was a pro bono attorney, and I was fortunate that my attorney was introduced by the SRF. He was a pro bono, he was a great guy, and he wrote to the USCIS that this guy he's losing his health. And it's been 5-6 years that he lives in this situation and this state of anxiety and stress. So even more than a year after that letter, I was able to go to USCIS. And, I don't want to go into details about this issue because I am comfortable talking about these issues, but I just want to take your time and, to share all those stories. But after 6 years, I was able to get my asylum, and still I don't have green card. I have applied 2-3 years ago for green card, so I have stuck here. If there is any job opportunity in Canada, in Europe, I can't go. And also, in order to avoid this unwritten discrimination, I had to get a second PhD. I had to start from scratch at the age of 35, 36 years. Just imagine, it was a tough decision. At the end of the day, it was wise, because you say, hey, I am here, I am in, I got my PhD from here. It's just about, when I applied for PhD, my current advisor at UMass told me, she said that, Ahmad, I saw that you applied for a job because you have such a long resume with all those books and articles. And I was wondering why such a guy should apply for a second PhD. And God knows, when I moved to Massachusetts again with the kids, and every time, one thing that's very important, Evren, is that when it comes to the asylee or to the displaced scholars, we take our family life, we take them for granted. We never address their issues. Basically, what we're concerned about is just our survival. We don't care about like the mental health of our children, of our wives, of our family. We don't care about that. We just need to stand on our feet. So it's just a very short part of episode of what I have been through during asylum, and even after that. It's been 2 years that I'm in job market. I applied for hundreds of jobs. And also, one final point, if I'm allowed, is that I was displaced from Iran because of the Islamic Republic regime. And when I came to the United States, we faced another layer of discrimination from our, basically, from those academicians from Iran. Believe it or not, when it comes to the application, when I apply for a job in the Middle Eastern studies, I am always trying to hide it or to lower it down. I mean, talking about my Kurdish background, talking about my ethnic background, because I know that there is another layer of the epistemic violence against us in the job market. I received no help, no advising, no consulting from the dominant elites. I mean, the Iranian elites who are here in the United States. I don't want to say that, hey, they have to provide us with jobs, but they can help us. They can, at least they can provide some sympathy, which they really refuse to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammadpour. And now I want to ask another question to Dr. Alawadhi. I remember that because, as I said in the beginning, I was also unemployed between 2013 and 2018, and I was just applying to any positions I could back then. And I remember, Dr. Alawadhi, you were the Dean of the College of Arts in Sana'a University, right? Because there was a job that I even applied for Yemen, for that university, and I remember your name as a dean. And then I had the chance to check your biography and see your books and your articles, and now you are here. So my question to you is not a personal one. So I'm not saying, why did you not pick me to that position back in 2014? But the question is this: how does your life as a scholar in your host country compare to your life as a scholar back home? What can you say about this? What kind of a comparison can you make to us in that sense? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Well, in comparing the two lives, there is, of course, differences, but I look to them from my own perspective. Personally, I mean, I had a wonderful life in Yemen. I was a dean. Socially, I'm good, high-ranking positions with my family, doing my research, what I would like to do, teaching my students, directing affairs in there. So I was good, in a good position. and suddenly I find myself cut from the world. So I have no contact, I have no network, I have no possibility to work, I have nothing. So when I am arriving, when I was arriving here in the United States. So it was very difficult a moment to look for a job. And I go here and there. And in the beginning, I sent my whole set, my achievement, a very detailed CV that I understand that is not working. So I shorten my CVs. I put it in a few lines. Just this is someone who get his PhD master degree in France, who can teach French, who can teach Arabic. That's all. I don't mention any of my other position, my other competencies, my publications, nothing. Just I need a job to work to make the two ends meet. And fortunately, I got a first a part-time job as any contingent job. This is, you don't know what is your schedule, how many hours you will teach, how many. So you're still always in the uncertainty. So whatever, of course, here in the United States, I learn a lot. I mean, in terms of professional development, a lot of things I learn here in the United States. This is, I say that. But in terms of stability, in terms of psychology, in terms of humiliation, if you want. So I do feel that the dignity that I have, I can't feel it, because you go from the highest rank in academia as a full professor in 2012 to be a lecturer or an instructor. This is with my student, the newest get it. So it is really horrible. So this is something that people can't understand it because it is not apparent in our face, but we feel the humiliation, we feel the discrimination, and we know it is not against us personally. This is the system. This is how the system works. Not only against what they call us as aliens, but also for those who are, in the academia, still under a contingent job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alawadhi. Thanks. That was a great speech. So I want to direct a question to Dr. Zeno and ask about what he thinks about the career path he has been going through since he left Syria. So Dr. Zeno, what do you think about the career path after you left Syria, your career path after you had to leave Syria? What do you think about it in general?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think mostly now, that's so there are two levels here. There are personal choices that we make in life as individuals, right? What we are passionate about and what we want to do. And sometimes you encounter questions and puzzles in life that you want to pursue. And that was my passion in political science. But at the same time, I'm still passionate about archaeology, which was constrained by structural violence. The violence that I'm talking about, in 2014, Damascus University dismissed me from the program without notification, so as a retaliation. So, and many of my colleagues went through the same field, not just in archaeology, but in many departments, where basically when the state is controlling, or the regime is controlling the narrative and controlling institutions, so they instrumentalize these institutions to retaliate against basically potential threat, to put it this way, or dissent, against dissent. So what does that entail? So two losses, individual losses, that you have built social and capital and also experiences over a decade. And also it's a loss for human capital for the country, right? Because instead of having a country that is investing in you, you invest and they invest in you. And then after 10 years, they push you under the bus. So there are two damages here, or double whammy. The second level here, as I said, like when I came here, I've tried very hard, but I found that's the irony. Like I found that even in political science and archaeology, where literally theory is coming from global north and data is coming from global south, and the mobility of actors and basically, and here I'm not using that as shaming a process at all. It's just an acknowledgement of conditions that exist in place that is unfavorable for scholars, basically with better citizenship. So there is the racialized violent border on the other part. Because when I shifted to political science, I remember, for instance, in 2017, the upheaval, like the of the so-called refugee crisis in Europe and others. So I have many family members who went through the Mediterranean, crossed borders, got lost, ended up in Germany and other countries. So I applied for a comparative study to conduct a comparative studies between the very same demography, Syrians basically, who are fleeing, and why they are choosing Germany, Sweden, or the United States, for instance, a comparative study. So I was awarded the Open Society Foundation for that year. And then when I wanted to travel, because I was a pending asylum seeker since 2013, I was banned from traveling. So basically I had to rewrite everything again and focus on the US context. And that happened also for my perspectives, also happened for my methodology, where you have, for instance, comparative study. I compare the experience of XY in two countries as political scientist. In my case, I was limited. I cannot move. Actually, the only equalizer in my life was COVID. For the first time, COVID actually made white scholar and also anyone in the global north sharing the very same precariousness. How, when you have a research design and then there are structural conditions or exogenous factors that limit your accessibility. So that was not just my life, I know the life of many other scholars who are basically, who can conduct research, let's say outside, and then they will be banned from coming back to the United States. We have at UMass, for instance, scholars who went to Iran to conduct research and they got stranded for 1 or 2 years under Trump. The second factor and the final factor that I want to comment on is similar to Ahmad. So I applied, but earlier, I arrived here in 2012, applied for asylum in July 2013. It took me 4 years to get an asylum interview, the first asylum interview in 2017, and that was with the rise of Trump. Then they dragged me for many years, over and over. It took me like 8 years experiencing legal violence that I can comment for the third question, how that manifests itself as a scholar and as a human here. And in May this year, a few months ago, my application was denied. So now I'm about to face a second wave of displacement, where by the end of the year, I will leave potentially for Canada. So there is I just want to problematize the assumption that once we are in a country in the global north, like the United States or Canada, so we are safe. Because we escape the immediate danger, the physical danger in our home country. So then we are here, so basically we are safe. In fact, there are two kinds of authoritarianism, the authoritarianism that we face in our country, but there is legal authoritarianism in the United States that we are facing, not just in academia, but also in our daily basis, like obtaining a work permit, obtaining like a driving license, maintaining our bank account, because Syria is in the blacklist of sanctions. So we kept receiving like a notification from the bank threatening us to freeze our account, etc. So we deal on every daily basis with the question of stolen time. Scholars need time to conduct the research. We found ourselves in the US for 10 years, actually, just trying to avoid illegalization, which was systematic, especially after the rise of Trump.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zeno. Especially Dr. Kehoe has also highlighted this in the chat to everyone, which is very important. And I also wanted to highlight that and emphasize it a little bit. It's like the global south providing the data, but its use being determined by the global north is a very important point. And since we are here now in the global north as scholars from global south, maybe I mean, we should concentrate more on that under Global Academy Fellows as well. So thank you very much. That's a wonderful point again. And Now I want to ask a question to Dr. Yenigün, because in the final part of his introduction, he talked about the job market in the USA. And, you know, more and more the universities in North America emphasize the importance of diversity in education system and also in the job market in some cases. What are your experiences? What do you think about the diversity and academic job market in North America in general, Dr. Yenigün?
Thank you so much, Evren, for that diversity point. Probably Ahmad could have responded to that in a better way, given our conversations last week amongst ourselves. Yeah, we don't belong to that category of the protected species as the American academic mind, you know, conceives it. We are not yet to that point that they have to protect us, because we are still in the primitive stage of like being saved from certain Oriental despots, right? And then like given a safe haven over here. So there are like double, triple burdens, and also like damages, and also violences, as Basileus put it. First, you know, we are brought here, and the immediate assumption is, okay, you were productive there, come here and just continue your work here. So as if there are not any mental baggage, psychological damage and baggage, and also like people you left back home and their struggles. So your desire to be part of the struggle still. And of course, my productivity got hit manifold over the years. And how can you expect people like to just come back here and then continue with that? I have had so many friends from Turkey, especially, but also elsewhere over here in this country who got through severe mental health problems. So, and we had to raise that with scholars at risk as well, that you can't just assume that people will continue where they left off, and then like start publishing, and then like send CVs. So one thing is about diversity. Actually, when I was at Stanford and I was on the job market, actually I'm still on the job market, but I don't know like how it works now. Like, but when I took my documents to and my cover letter to the Career Center at Stanford, so they had no answer to give me, like how to frame my situation. Like, is it going to affect you in a worse way or in a better way? To know that for them, like that you are in this situation, because okay, again, like picking up from the last point, like they celebrate you when you stand up against a despot over there, okay, and then they have no place for you over here, because they have this quite structured system where it doesn't allow for any kind of gap years, any kind of, you know, like unsmooth factors on your CV. So what happened here? You have to explain that. And actually, I got into like in a scholar at risk workshop. I was observing just like a provost and a dean just talking back and forth. Okay, so should he put it or should he not put it? And provost basically sharing her experience that actually like lots of donors would have lots of reservations about so many issues. So let's talk about how many donors over here are trying not to hurt the interests of Turkey, right? Turkish money on these at these universities over here, Turkish funds at these universities over here. All this donation structure over here is not any less pernicious than the political pressure on the universities over there overseas. That's one thing. And also we also know that once we got here, the struggle never ended. You know, like over here. So let's talk about Nicole Hannah Jones. Right? Let's talk about University of Florida professors who were not allowed to testify, but for the suppression. And how is it different from what we were going through in the quote unquote good times in Turkey? So the struggle here, actually, this is a point also like I've been making whenever I'm interviewed about, you know, this poor guy who just escaped this dictatorship and just found a safe haven over here. Okay, like we have to stop the dictatorship over here. Like we're at that point over here, because it starts with media and academia, and once they're under attack, then the rest will come if you don't stop them there. Now, they all frame, the whole thing as critical race theory, right? Like some Republican shrewd guy, was able to dub it, in a very clever way as critical race theory, like a specific thing taught to our kids in high school. Let's stop it. So Democrats just found themselves on the defensive and came up with the most absurd kind of defense, and then they are paying the political cost for that. But the real thing is, they are trying to, put us also in this bipolar world of Democrats and Republicans, and we know from the very beginning we don't belong there. And I want to also pick up on Ahmed's 2 points. One is the gatekeepers, the gatekeepers. So the other problem is that bipolar world that they put us in. So just like the Republicans and Democrats, the same way you are either, for instance, pro-Palestine or pro-Zionist, or Islamophobe or Islamophile. But you the whole thing is basically divided that way in a bipolar way, and the whole politics of our countries are mistranslated over here, as if, for instance, you are criticizing Turkish government, they can easily invert it to make it look like you are an Islamophobe. Because why? You are criticizing a Muslim government. You're criticizing this. This has also a lot of other ways to frame the whole abuse and misuse of the discourse from Orientalism. And again, this is also a continuation of Ahmed's point, and we have to give credit to their important work on that. So inside the Middle East Studies Association, right? The being silenced, being censored. We also, myself and my colleague, we wrote a piece on Turkey's global outreach activities to frame itself as the patron of global Muslim solidarity. And immediately we were attacked by people over here, some of the top gatekeepers of Islamic studies. Because once you criticize somebody, so apparently, criticize somebody from those causes that they celebrate because of their connection with the Turkish government and because of their voluntary work to further the Turkish regime's interests overseas and over there, then you are immediately under, you are falling to the opposite ground for them. And you can't even raise these kind of issues. It is again this bipolar world, and the gatekeepers of let's say, for instance, Muslim academia or Middle East academia. Those gatekeepers are also exerting this kind of pressure and violence. You can't, for instance, be at the same time pro-Kurdish and pro-Palestinian, right? So once you are pro-Palestinian, you have to love Erdogan, and then you have to further Erdogan's interests. Because if you go against that, then you are hurting interest of Palestinians, because Palestinians are supported by Erdogan. Their logic goes as simple as this way. And then the moment you criticize Erdogan, they got alarmed. Okay, this will hurt down the road because of our alliances, our larger alliances, our interests. So let's just stop that, and let's attack them, and let's call them Islamophobe. Let's call them these people are and pro-imperialist, right? So you are attacked over that in your country for being pro-mandate, pro-imperialist, and when you come here, then you are labeled as Islamophobe, right? These guys, they don't even know whether you are a pious Muslim or not. It doesn't matter, because you are hurting that the way they frame global Muslim interests. So we are actually facing all these challenges. Where do we belong in that diversity scheme? Nowhere. And how can we raise these issues over here in this academia? So we have to start with actually Middle East Studies Association, the association that has been supporting us for this cause, and we have to basically make these nuances more known. That if you are anti-imperialist over here,
that doesn't mean that you have to be pro-Iranian regime, right? Or like you have to support some of the causes that Iranian regime or Turkish regime or some like Arab regime over there, Qatar, etc. Like in those Qatar-funded, think tanks in DC, right? Or like in order to criticize, Saudi Arabia, you don't have to be pro-Qatar or pro-Turkey, just like the majority of the people in those think tank and academic world are doing now. So I have to say that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Yenigün. That was a very important contribution. Dr. Taraky, what do you think? I mean, I listened to what you said, and you said that you don't want to talk about the personal experiences as the others, but I want to ask you this question. What types of initiatives do you deem the most helpful to provide a safe haven for scholars at risk, and what can other potential host institutions learn from them? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I would go from a little bit of a different perspective. I'd be a little bit of a devil's advocate. Number one, before we end up coming to the global north or the United States of America or Canada, we lived in our own countries and we were under pressure, physical, mental, all kinds of pressures. And we ran away and we ended up here. We came here to a country which is based on the fundamental principles of liberal economy, principles of profit. The bottom line in these societies are profit. And the gatekeeping mentality is coming from the profit issues. And when we come here, we have to understand that this is the case. And in my experience, we have to lower our expectations. I lowered my expectations when I came here to the rock bottom. And for the reasons that I knew the new liberal economy, the new liberal society. And the other reason was that my past experience was so bad that anything I would receive here was good for me, anything. So when you're having lower expectations and then you grow from there, there will be always sort of discrimination, not for the color of your skin maybe, possibly it is also for color of your skin, possibly for the look of you, possibly for the knowledge that you carry, and possibly for other reasons. But the bottom line is profit and access to resources. And I don't know why many scholars and many other immigrants are complaining that they're not getting the attention they're supposed to get. I do agree. I serve the immigrants communities. I know the pain. I feel the pain and I understand that. But it will be very difficult to solve all these problems right away until we have class societies, until we have profit-based societies. Because if you go to a company, nobody wants to share their piece of pie with you. In the universities, nobody gives you access to the bigger chunk of funding if you want to go in and want to have access for that. The other issues I want to touch base is, according to the studies and data that is available, for every doctor, there is 10 people working, nurses, doctor's assistant, personal support workers. Like for every doctor, about 8 to 10 people are working. Basically, a doctor is an employer. For every lawyer, at least 4 people are working. These are clerks, these are assistants, legal assistants, and others. For every engineer, there is at least 3 people are working. I work in the engineering field, 3 people, technologists and 2 technicians, or maybe more. My question is, why we having a PhD from the global North institutions, basically breaking these big barriers? Why we have to be complaining? We should be employers. We should be giving jobs to others. I don't understand. I never had this problem. I did well. I was never unemployed. I never. When I was not employed by a university, I went and I created my own company. When my company didn't well, I went to consult people. I started doing other things. Basically, I put bread on the table. My understanding is that people with scholarships and with degrees in such as PhD should be able to find their own means of breadwinning and income protection, and not only for themselves, but they have also have the opportunity to employ other assistants, data mining students, graduate students, whatever. So this is maybe this is not a good popular approach around the table, but because I came from such a background that I left a collapse, like almost a concrete roof fell on me, almost like just bullets were just maybe few feet from me. So I said, whatever I get after this, I'll accept it. I came here. I was also denied. I was also not given the opportunity from the first shot. But I keep banging on the wall, keep knocking on the door, and this is a market. We are products in this market. We have to understand. If you go to a mall, you will look for 10, 50 items, and then you choose one. We are items in this global neoliberal market. Until there is a market, we are the commodities, and we have to be accepting the rules of this market. Once the market is gone, then we have to be talking about issues like scholars. So just to wrap this up, I think there will be discrimination in the academic environment. There will be discrimination. In part, this discrimination may not be because of our religion, because of our affiliation to a party, our affiliation to a country. It could be simply an income protection discrimination. They simply do not want to share a piece of the pie. And you got the university degrees, you got the PhDs. Then once you have your degrees, your PhDs, your licenses, like for example, I got my license. I cannot say that, oh, I don't have a job. That's not good. We have to be employers for others. That's the issue, is that at the same time when we are here, and some of us have immigration problems, some of us hearing issues, we always have to look at the bigger picture, where we came from, and what is the situation in the place where we used to live and we used to teach. Just compare it, compare Damascus, compare Baghdad, Tripoli, compare Kabul. It is not comparable what kind of life these people have. We're way better off. We should be dedicating minimum half of our time how to change lives in those places and how to bring changes into those places. I don't know, maybe I'm sounding too much of a enthusiast, but this is what I'm doing and I'm enjoying it. I was successful and I never failed. I never stayed unemployed, and I put bread on the table, but we are putting more than 60% of our time serving the people, our classmates, our students who are stayed behind and who are now struggling with a piece of bread. We are basically employing other people with something that they will survive. But the issues of discrimination and problem in the academic environment is also related to the access to resources. If you agree with me, knowledge and scholarship is a commodity in the neoliberal society.
Yes.
The moment it stops becoming a commodity, then we can start this complaint. Now we cannot complain because it's a commodity. It's like oil, crude oil. It's like a gold. It's like a copper. Knowledge. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I have a couple of points to add from a different perspective, obviously, because when I was listening to you, what came to my mind was an episode from Big Bang Theory, where Sheldon Cooper, the one of the main protagonists, was attempting in a knowledge competition, and he couldn't find any partners to run with him, and then he had to take the janitor from the university and the waitress from the university in his team, and it became obvious that the janitor had a PhD in nuclear physics in university from Moscow, and the other one from another place. And that was always like a joke to me when my friends were telling me like there are people with PhD who are driving taxis in USA, in Canada. I was like feeling, okay, maybe it's their mistake. You know, I had a similar approach with as you had, but when you said research and funding, something appeared to my mind as someone who lives in Canada for 4 years right now. If you are in Canada, I don't know if you are aware of this or not, and if you want to apply for a research grant or a funding as a faculty member with knowledge and information, I'm using my quotation mark fingers and I keep them here on the screen, you have to have a permanent residence. You cannot apply for a grant with a work permit. So you need to wait to have a permanent residence to apply. You need to have this kind of privilege, just like a Canadian citizen or a Canadian permanent residence, in order to show the people, show the public that you have the knowledge and you are ready to use that research funding. So I totally agree with what you said, but also adding to this, these specific points of years-long experience back in our home countries as PhDs, as assistant professors, as deans of the faculties, and then ending up here as people with work permit waiting for their permanent residence, or in case of Dr. Mohammadpour waiting for 5 years for an interview, 9 years for an interview, then the things, or in the competition, you are not in the same position or in the equal position with others. So that by the land of opportunities does not always sound same to everyone, and especially to scholars like us in that sense. I just wanted to add this as a trying to be objective moderator here, but I have a further question. There you go. Dr. Mohammadpour raises his hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just didn't want to miss this point in line with our previous conversation and the idea of diversity, which is a sort of like a big, how to tell you, it's a big lie in the applications. We are always asked in the application, there are questions about diversity and I mean the minority affiliation, but it's interesting that in all those applications, the diversity and the minority are always limited to Hispanic and Blacks, which is fine, of course, I am always advocating, but how about us, about those displaced people who are not, you know, who can't be fallen under those categories? This is one situation, you know, when it comes to me as a Kurdish scholar from Iran, even as a person who is affiliated with the ethnic and religious minority, I don't know where to put my name in those applications. This is the first issue. The second issue is the job interviews. We are always asked, how do we address diversity? I am answering K. I am the embodiment of diversity. And how do you address diversity in your faculty, in your department? We have to mention that in our cover letter, in our interview, that we are kind of like aware of the LGBTQs, the Black people, Latinos. That's fine. That's fine. That's totally fine. But why should we always address those issues and we are not be addressed in those applications, in those opportunities? This is another issue that has to be mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammadpour. Dr. Alawadhi, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
Yes, I think, yes, I thank you. I thank you to give me the floor again. In fact, the question of diversity, this is a you know, a repetitive question. Every time they ask us to write about diversity, they ask us in the interview. When they ask me that question about diversity, I said, well, listen, I participated to drafting an international convention about diversity when I was ambassador to UNESCO. And one of the most difficult problem is to define what is diversity, how we can define diversity. As said Ahmad correctly, so we need to talk about inclusiveness. Okay, so this is the term that we supposed to talk about, rather to say diversity. And by diversity, as said Ahmad, it is intended to include specific groups that represent a kind of minority was correct. I agree with him completely. I need just to say that this is because I think this will be my last wording, and I leave because I have another point. I'm so sorry for that. So I need to add, because I said in the beginning that I am under TBS. So I'm so far, I mean, under even Mohammed and Basileus, they are in advanced stage compared to me and my family. So when I'm thinking about TBS, this is temporary protected status. This is a hybrid status that means no asylum, no residency, no path to citizenship, no way to go out, no way to have any benefits. No, you have only two rights: to be legally in the state and to get a permit to work. This is only that. Unemployment, you are not included. Benefit, you are not included. Healthcare, you are not included. So you can compare how a scholar can live that, not for himself. My future is behind me, for me. Personally, I'm talking frankly. My future is behind me. I'm talking about my child. So he has a chance to travel to the other side of Niagara Falls in Canada to just with his school. He can't because he is under TBS. He's under the right to leave United States. I get several invitations to go to the Middle East. I can't because if I request what they call it advanced parole, and this advanced parole come back in 1 year after, so this is impossible. So, and it is written that you have no, that any employer can request you to not get the plane. So nothing guarantee for that situation. So you can see that even among us, among other, this suffering that we are talking about, there is more than just a financial or social suffering. There is psychological, something that we hide it because we can't explain that. So I don't know how many years I will arrive to the path when Ahmad get the interview. I'm still here. So I don't know what will be my son when he is in 2 years will get his high school degree. Can he get to the university? Because my mission from the beginning was to get to state for the education of my son. So can I help my son to get to the university? This is a big question. Okay, so I'm so sorry for that, but I would like in the end to thank Global Academy program for giving us this opportunity to get together. And I thank you, your program, Stevie, in your university, and Evren, to get us and to raise that question, because this is something that nobody talk about it. We talk always about displacement, about immigration, about legal. I'm not migrant. I would like to be, but I'm not migrant. So I have no status. I'm hopeless, stateless, how we say, everything with less, if you can imagine it. But I'm still proud of my production. I published last year the most extended bibliography in Arabic about translation studies. Okay, 500 pages. It's very famous. Of course, this is a personal endeavors, but I show you that within this dark atmosphere, there is some people who would like to help within academia, within institutions in United States, in Canada, and everywhere. And we are lucky to be in North America, and we will keep it happy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, for those powerful words at the end, Hamid. That takes us to the end of our time today. And I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight for their time, to our audience who have stuck with us. Thank you for coming to learn from our speakers about what forced migration looks like in real life. We may read in newspaper articles about, ongoing civil wars and conflicts in seemingly faraway places like Afghanistan, like Yemen, like Syria, like Iran, like Turkey. But we're very rarely confronted with the fate, and what the real human fates that looks like, and the people who are affected by this. And that is why I'm deeply, deeply grateful to our guests today, Dr. Alawadhi, Dr. Mohammadpour, Dr. Yenigün, Dr. Zeno, Dr. Taraky, and also to Abdul Nasser Majidi, who joined us from his temporary exile. On behalf of the Guelph Institute of Development Studies, thank you so much for volunteering your time today and sharing your stories.
Thank you very
Your
much.
journeys as displaced scholars are not feel-good stories, but they're stories that more people need to know about. And because your stories are representative of the struggles of hundreds of thousands and growing number of peoples, thank you for sharing not just your stories, but your experiences, your feelings, your frustrations too, because these are real too. And as we wrap up this evening's roundtable, I'm left to acknowledge that this event, something like this, is really just a drop in an ocean of need to give voice to those who are displaced by conflict and by persecution around the world. And that is why it's important to give, these kinds of platforms more often. Each single one of your stories could have filled easily the whole time today. We wanted to involve as many stories as possible and as many voices as possible because of how many people are affected by this. And so while the world is paying its 5 minutes of attention to what's going on in Afghanistan right now, we need to learn that this is not a problem that has been solved in the past. These problems will persist and we need to find sustainable solutions. So it's been a pleasure and a real honor to learn from you tonight. Thank you for opening up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.